France just made a move that's left the world stunned, especially the US and even the EU. What did they do? They've thrown a massive curveball into the global electric vehicle race, oil markets, and international trade. And trust me, this is going to change everything. Stick around, because this story is bigger than you think. What started as a simple effort to protect American industries has now turned into a high-stakes global showdown, one that could reshape international trade for years to come. It all began when President Trump in early 2025 approved a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum imports. The goal was to protect American manufacturers from being undercut by cheaper foreign competitors. But what Washington may not have anticipated was how quickly France, and by extension, the entire European Union, would hit back. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot wasted no time making it clear Europe wouldn't just stand by while its industries took a hit. France has drawn a line in the sand, refusing to let US trade policies dictate the future of its manufacturing sector. And now, retaliatory measures are already in motion. For the automotive industry, this is a game changer. Steel and aluminum are essential materials in car production, and any disruption in their supply or pricing sends shockwaves through the entire industry. With raw material costs rising, automakers are facing tough decisions. Do they absorb the higher expenses, cutting into their profits, or do they pass the costs on to consumers? Either way, the outcome isn't looking good. Car prices are likely to rise, and production delays could become more common. But France's decision to strike, back with its own trade restrictions, signals something bigger, a fundamental shift in global economic alliances. As US trade relations grow more unpredictable, France has been strengthening its partnerships elsewhere, most notably with China. And this isn't just about making a political statement, it's a strategic move that could reshape the French and European automotive industries. In recent years, France and China have been deepening their economic ties, and the numbers prove it. In 2023 alone, trade between the two nations surged to nearly $79 billion, an incredible increase over the past few decades. French President Emmanuel Macron's visit to Beijing in April 2023 wasn't just for show. It led to major agreements, spanning agriculture, aviation, and, crucially, automotive technology. For French automakers, this partnership is a game-changer. China dominates the electric vehicle, EV, battery market, and its massive consumer base offers a valuable lifeline, as US trade restrictions threaten profits. French car manufacturers are already exploring joint ventures with Chinese firms, gaining access to cutting-edge EV technology while expanding into one of the world's fastest-growing auto markets. This shift toward China underscores a key lesson. In global trade, diversification isn't just a good idea, it's a necessity. Relying too much on any one market, whether it's the US or China, exposes industries to unnecessary risks. France's ability to pivot and secure new trade deals could be the key to keeping its automotive sector stable in the long run. But, while these economic realignments take shape, the immediate effects of US tariffs are already being felt across Europe's auto supply chain. The auto industry runs like a finely tuned machine, with parts and materials moving seamlessly between suppliers and manufacturers. But tariffs are throwing that balance off, leading to rising costs, longer production timelines, and major logistical headaches. Big companies that rely on transatlantic trade are already weighing their options. Airbus CEO Guillaume Faury has suggested that if US tariffs continue to drive up costs, the aerospace giant might start prioritizing non-US customers. And if a company as influential as Airbus is considering shifting its focus, it's not hard to imagine similar moves happening in the automotive world. For car manufacturers, this could mean a complete rethink of their supply chains. Some automakers may consider relocating production facilities to sidestep high tariffs, while others might try sourcing materials from alternative markets. But these kinds of adjustments aren't quick or easy. Setting up new supply lines and manufacturing hubs takes time and money, both of which are already in short supply as the industry grapples with rising costs and economic uncertainty. The real wildcard in all of this: how consumers will react. If tariffs continue driving up car prices, demand could take a serious hit, especially in a market where inflation and economic instability have already made big purchases feel riskier. Higher prices could push buyers away, leading to fewer sales, reduced production, and even job losses across the industry. It's a domino effect that no automaker wants to see. Some companies may try to absorb costs in the short term to keep prices stable, but that's not a sustainable strategy forever. That's not a sustainable solution. If trade tensions drag on, manufacturers will have no choice but to pass those rising costs onto consumers, making vehicles more expensive across the board. At the same time, the uncertainty surrounding global trade policies is making it harder for businesses to plan ahead. If automakers knew these tariffs were only temporary, they could develop short-term strategies to ride out the storm. But with no clear resolution in sight, companies are being forced to make long-term decisions in an unpredictable environment. And it's not just automakers feeling the strain. The ripple effect extends to suppliers, dealerships, and even aftermarket service providers. A disruption in steel and aluminum supply doesn't just impact new car production, it also drives up the cost of replacement parts, making repairs and maintenance more expensive. That puts car owners in a tough spot. Some who had planned to keep their current vehicles longer instead of buying new ones now have to consider rising maintenance costs, adding another layer of financial stress. This trade battle between the US and France isn't just about steel and aluminum, it's about the future of global commerce. As tensions escalate, the European Union is stepping up, preparing for what could turn into a full-scale economic standoff. France may have fired the first shot in response to US tariffs, but it's not standing alone. The entire EU is rallying behind the idea that it must protect its industries from aggressive trade policies coming from across the Atlantic. French President Emmanuel Macron has been particularly vocal, calling for a united response to what he sees as unfair trade measures. His message is clear. The EU cannot afford to sit back and let tariffs dictate its economic future. While diplomacy is still an option, Europe is also preparing for its own set of retaliatory tariffs. If the US keeps pushing forward with trade restrictions, the EU is ready to hit back just as hard. For the automotive industry, the stakes couldn't be higher. The European Union is one of the world's largest automotive exporters, home to industry giants like Volkswagen, BMW, Mercedes-Benz, Renault, and Stellantis. If trade tensions continue to escalate, it could create supply chain chaos, drive up production costs, and hurt Europe's competitiveness in global markets. To counteract these risks, EU leaders are already discussing ways to shield European automakers from rising costs and shifting trade policies. While Brussels is keeping diplomatic channels open, they've also made it clear they won't hesitate to take action if necessary. If tariffs keep pushing up the prices of raw materials and car parts, manufacturers may have to completely rethink their production strategies. One of the biggest shifts happening right now is France's accelerated effort to diversify its trade partnerships. With US trade policies becoming increasingly unpredictable, France and the EU are taking steps to reduce their reliance on American markets. Instead of focusing so heavily on transatlantic trade, they're expanding economic ties with Asia, Latin America, and Africa, seeking new opportunities to offset potential losses from trade disputes. China, in particular, has become a key player in this realignment. As the world's largest automotive market and a leader in electric vehicle EV technology, China offers European automakers a massive opportunity. French car makers like Renault and Peugeot are already strengthening their presence there, forming partnerships to access cutting-edge EV battery technology and expand in the fast-growing Asian market. But this shift isn't just about selling more cars, it's about reducing risk. By spreading their trade relationships across multiple regions, European automakers are working to insulate themselves from the uncertainty of US tariffs and create a more stable future for the industry. If European automakers can build strong trade relationships outside the US, they'll be better insulated from the unpredictability of American trade policies. By tapping into emerging markets and securing more diverse supply chains, they're creating a buffer against economic disruptions. For the automotive industry, this strategic shift could be a game changer. Companies that successfully navigate these changes will be in a much stronger position to handle global trade uncertainties. By investing in alternative markets and technology, Partnerships. European manufacturers are focusing on long-term stability, rather than being at the mercy of shifting US policies. But while this approach offers stability, it also comes with challenges. Expanding into new markets requires significant investment, time, and regulatory approvals. Automakers must adapt to different economic environments, cater to varying consumer preferences, and even establish local production facilities to stay competitive. It's a complex process, one that won't happen overnight. At the same time, this shift in trade strategy raises bigger questions about the future of US-EU relations. The two have long been economic allies, but growing trade disputes are putting that relationship to the test. The more the EU looks to China and other global partners, the more the balance of power in international trade begins to shift. If tensions keep escalating, the EU could further distance itself from the US, strengthening its economic ties with Asia and other emerging markets. This wouldn't just impact the automotive industry, it could reshape the entire structure of global trade. Supply chains would be reconfigured, investment flows redirected, and trade agreements rewritten. At the heart of this conflict is a crucial question. Can the US and EU resolve their differences, or are we witnessing the beginning of a long-term economic realignment? Right now, both sides are weighing their options. If they fail to reach an agreement, the global auto industry could face years of uncertainty, forcing companies to constantly adjust to a shifting trade landscape. The decisions being made today will shape the future of the industry. If European automakers succeed in diversifying their markets and reducing their reliance on US trade, they could come out of this not just surviving, but stronger, more resilient, and better prepared for whatever economic challenges lie ahead. However, if trade disputes escalate into full-scale tariffs and retaliatory measures, the consequences could be severe. Higher costs, disrupted supply chains, and a more fragmented global automotive market. As France and the EU weigh their next moves, automakers are stuck in a difficult position. Do they wait and see how trade negotiations play out, or do they start reshaping their supply chains and investment strategies now? It's a high-stakes gamble that could define the future of car manufacturing for decades. This ongoing trade battle between the US and the European Union is about more than just tariffs. It's a turning point in global economic relations. And the automotive industry, one of the hardest-hit sectors, is right at the center of it. All with manufacturers on both sides preparing for long-term consequences. What started as an effort to protect domestic industries has spiraled into a complex economic standoff that could reshape transatlantic trade for years to come. At the heart of the issue is the US government's decision to impose a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum imports. While the policy was intended to strengthen American manufacturing, it has instead sparked a wave of retaliatory actions from the European Union. The auto industry, which relies heavily on these raw materials, is feeling the pressure. Rising material costs are driving up production expenses, and those costs are already being passed down to consumers. European automakers, including industry giants like Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes-Benz, now face a tough reality. Adapt to this new economic landscape or risk losing their competitive edge. For years, the US market has been a key player in the global sales strategy of European automakers. But now, rising tariffs are making it harder for them to stay competitive. A 25% tariff on European car imports would significantly drive up costs, potentially pushing American buyers toward domestic alternatives. This isn't just a problem for European manufacturers. American automakers like Ford and General Motors also depend on global supply chains. If the European Union responds with its own tariffs, it could become more expensive for US car makers to sell in Europe, hurting their business as well. The auto industry is deeply interconnected, and a disruption in one region has ripple effects across the globe. It's one of the biggest contributors to transatlantic trade, supporting millions of jobs on both sides. With so much at stake, industry leaders are urging policymakers to find a resolution before things get worse. Many are pushing for diplomatic talks, but with both sides standing firm, a quick solution seems unlikely. In response, some manufacturers are exploring ways to adapt. Some may shift production to regions unaffected by tariffs, while others are looking for ways to rely less on imported materials. this could mean more investment in domestic manufacturing. But that kind of transition doesn't happen overnight. Setting up new factories, securing local supply chains, and navigating regulations take time, meaning the impact of these trade tensions could be felt for years. The uncertainty is making long-term planning a nightmare for automakers. Developing a new vehicle takes years, and companies need stability to make smart decisions about production, pricing, and market strategies. But with tariffs constantly changing and trade relations in flux, the road ahead remains unclear. Companies are finding it increasingly difficult to predict the cost of doing business in the near future. The real concern isn't just the immediate impact of tariffs, it's the potential for long-term instability. If the US and the EU fail to reach an agreement, the global automotive market could become even more fragmented. Automakers may be forced to develop region-specific strategies, designing and producing different models for different markets just to avoid tariffs. While this shift could open doors for more localized manufacturing, it also adds complexity and costs, making the industry less efficient as a whole. Beyond just the auto industry, this trade dispute is raising bigger questions about the future of US-EU relations. These two economic giants have historically worked together on major global issues, but their growing divide over trade policies is putting that partnership to the test. If tensions persist, the EU may start strengthening ties with alternative economic partners, reducing its reliance on the US market. China is already emerging as a key player in this shifting landscape. As European automakers look for ways to offset US tariffs, China's massive consumer market and leadership in electric vehicle production are becoming increasingly appealing. Companies that once focused primarily on transatlantic trade are now exploring new opportunities in Asia, forging partnerships to shield themselves from the risks posed by US policies. This realignment could have long-term consequences. If the EU deepens its trade relationships with China and other global markets, the US could see its influence in the international auto industry shrink. American manufacturers would still play a major role, but their dominance could be challenged by emerging competitors that are better positioned to navigate this evolving landscape. The outcome of this trade dispute won't just affect automakers, it will have a major impact on consumers too. If tariffs stay in place, car prices will keep rising, making vehicle ownership more expensive. Higher production costs mean manufacturers will have to pass those expenses on to buyers, leading to increased financing costs, insurance rates, and maintenance expenses. For many, this could mean delaying a purchase or choosing more affordable alternatives. The trade battle could also slow the adoption of new technologies, especially as electric vehicles, EVs, become a bigger part of the market. The EV industry depends on a global supply chain, with key components like batteries and semiconductors sourced from multiple countries. Trade restrictions could make it harder for automakers to access these materials, potentially slowing down the transition to cleaner transportation. The next few months will be crucial in determining the future of the global auto industry. If diplomatic efforts succeed, both sides could reach a compromise that stabilizes trade relations and prevents further disruptions. But if tensions continue to escalate, we could see a long-term shift that permanently changes how cars are built and sold worldwide. One thing is certain: the decisions made today will shape the automotive industry for years to come. Automakers, policymakers, and consumers all have a stake in the outcome, and the road ahead is anything but clear. Will this trade war drive innovation and resilience, or will it bring economic turbulence and instability?